Okay, we are going to start the daf yomi for Shabbos Kodesh. This is Kesubos Nun Beis, Kesubos 52, Rosh Shabbos, Rosh Chodesh El. We're going to start on the bottom of Nun Aleph and Beis, 2 lines from the bottom. Amar Abaye, so Abaye taught Almano a Kohen Gadol. Now let's say a widow is married to a Kohen Gadol. We know that this is a prohibition, that they're not allowed to be married. However, the marriage, the way we pass is that the marriage is binding. And so therefore, Chayav Liftosa, he has to redeem her, even though the marriage is not binding. He's agreed to redeem her. Shani Koreba uva Kohenes Hadrinech Medinasech. Because what's the phrase that our Mishnah says that it was part of the Tanai Ksuba, that there are certain elements of the Tanai Ksuba, the baseline stipulations of the Ksuba that the rabbis instituted. Some of those elements are there to maintain the marriage peacefully, and some of them are to prevent the marriage from being too easily dissolved. So one of the stipulations of the Ksuba was that if a woman who's married to a Kohen was kidnapped, and therefore there's a suspicion that she was assaulted, he has to redeem her, but then she returns to her father's home. So therefore, so too with this widow to the Kohen Gadol, Abaye says, we apply that phrase, Shani Koreba, we say about the widow married to the Kohen Gadol, Adrinech, we say, that I'll return you to your country. So too says the Gemara on the top of Mem Beis and Aleph. Nun Beis and Aleph, the Gemara says, Mamzeres unesino Yisrael. Let's say we have a circumstance of a Mamzeres unesino. These are people who are regular Yisrael is not allowed to marry. However, Eino Chayav La'atosa. Abaye says that if you marry her, he's not obligated to redeem her. What's the reason why if you marry her is not obligated to be redeemer? Because when it comes to a regular Yisrael, not a Kohen, the phrase is that I'm going to redeem you and return you to be my wife. But in this case, I can't say it. I can't say I'm going to return you to be my wife. And so therefore, since he can't say that, where it's a mamzeres or nesina, because he's not allowed to be married to her, therefore he's not obligated to redeem her. Rava says no. Rava argues with Abaye. And we know the law is like Rava, because it's not one of the 6 cases where of Yaltiyam where we see the rules like Abaye. Rava says, Kol she'isur shavia gorim, whatever the reason why he's not allowed to be married to her is because she was captured, then chayav liftosa, like then he's obligated to redeem her. Like for example, a regular Kohen is married to a woman, he's allowed to be married to her, but now that she's captured, he can't remain married to her. So then he's obligated to redeem her. But isur davar achar gorim, but if there's another reason why why he's not allowed to remain married to her, for example, let's say she was a divorcee, then he's not obligated to redeem her. And so therefore, in the case of the widow to the Kohen Gadol, Rava would say he's not obligated to redeem her because she was already a widow, and so therefore it's nothing to do with the captivity that he's not allowed to remain married to her. But in the case of Mamzeres and Nesino Yisrael, Rava agrees with Abaye that he's not obligated to redeem her. So the Gemara says, let's say that this dispute between Rava and Abaye is actually a dispute amongst the Tanaim. Let's say it relates to an earlier dispute, Kid Tanaim. What did we learn? Hamadiras Ishto. Let's say a man takes a vow, and as part of this vow, he says this woman is prohibited to derive any benefit from him. And so therefore, he's obligated to divorce her. Benishbes, and then she's captured. So under those circumstances, Rabbi Eliezer Omer Podev and no Singok Suvasa. Eliezer says he must redeem her and give her Kesuva. And then and he divorces her, but he redeems her and he divorces her and gives her a ksuba. Whereas Rabbi Yeshua says no sila ksuba. So Rabbi Yeshua says he gives her a ksuba ve'eno poda, but he's not required to redeem her. And we're going to explain the logic here. And then the third thing is Rabbi Nosson says sha'alti es sumchus. Rabbi Nosson says I asked sumchus kishama Rabbi Yeshua no sila ksuba so ve'eno poda. So Rabbi Nosson says, I asked Sumchus the following question. He says that Kishama Rabbi Yeshua says you give her the ksuba and you don't, oh, if you want a Talmud, they're right here are the Talmuds. So he says, we're joined by two tzaddikim in our stars. Yeah, those are the Talmuds. So he says, well, Rabbi Yeshua said, you give her the ksuba and you don't redeem her. Does that mean kisheidira or b'sof nishbeis? Does that mean where he took the vow that he's not going to benefit from her and then she was captured? Or b'nishbeis or b'sof nadira? Or did he really capture her and was she captured and then he took the vow? But Amarli and Simcha said to me, Lo Shamati. Simcha said to me, I never heard this teaching from my teachers. We're in the middle of 52a. V'nirin dvarim and she. But I think that Rabbi Yeshua is saying that when does Rabbi Yeshua say that we give her the ksuba and we don't redeem her? Only in a circumstance where she was, where he took the vow and then she was captured. Where if he took the vow and then she was captured, then he gives her the ksuba and he doesn't redeem her. Because if you say she was captured and then he took the vow, then he can do all sorts of tricks. What kind of tricks? Because then when people whose wives are captured and they don't want to redeem them, what will do? He'll come and say that I'll come and take a vow that he can't have any benefit from her. So as a result of this, he just has to give her the ksuba and he doesn't need to be redeemed. So the Gemara says, what kind of person are we talking about here in this vow? Ma'alab and Madir Eishes Kohen Kamiflagi. Are we talking about the person who took the vow, was married, was the wife, the person where Cohen says you're not allowed to benefit, I'm not going to benefit from my wife, and so therefore he's obligated to redeem her even though she's not going to remain in his wife. So and so isn't that the scenario? Rashi says the Cohen. I'm going to read the Rashi. Rashi says the Cohen shehidiras ishto. By Cohen who took a vow against his wife. Ibi Yisrael, because if it's a regular Israelite, then Rabbi Lazar wouldn't say that you have to redeem her and give her ksuva, because because then about her we can't read the ksuva that you return her to be your wife. We can't read that stipulation. So we're talking about a Kohen, and because he could say I'm returning her to be another country to back to her father's home. So Rabbi Lazar says under those circumstances redeem her, even though there's another reason why you're not allowed to be with her. So Rabbi Eliezer still says you redeem her, even though there's another reason why you're not allowed to be with her, and that is like Abaye. Abaye says even though there's another reason why you can't be with her, you have to redeem her. So Rabbi Eliezer says you have to be like Abaye is like Rabbi Eliezer, and Rava must be like Rabbi Yoshua, who says you don't redeem her since something else caused her to be prohibited, and that is that vow. So when Rabbi Yeshua says no single ksubas of Eina Poda, Rava is consistent with Rabbi Yeshua. So the Gemara says Abaye Damak Rabbi Eliezer, Rava Damak Rabbi Yeshua. Must be that Abaye holds like Rabbi Eliezer and Rava holds like Rabbi Yeshua. The Gemara says no, that's not the case. Lo Achamay Askina. What are we talking about here? Kigod Nadra Ihi Vikayim Lahu. Now we're talking about a case where she made the vow and the husband upheld the vow. The husband, a woman made a vow that she's not allowed to have any benefit from her husband, and the husband heard this vow and he didn't object to it. And this is the explanation for the dispute between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua. This is the explanation for the dispute. Rabbi Eliezer says that what's the reasoning why we say he redeems her and he also has to give her the ksuva is because Rabbi Eliezer says, who knows, saying etzva bein shinah. He's stuck, it's his problem. He stuck his finger in between her teeth, meaning it's his fault. He could have easily annulled the vow. Whereas Rabbi Yeshua's other position, no, he nasna etzva bein shinah. She stuck her finger between her own teeth, meaning to say she stuck her finger between her own teeth, and so it's her fault. So the Gemara says, well, it's her fault. If she stuck her finger between her teeth, she's causing a divorce. Then why does she get the ksuva? She caused this divorce. And furthermore, Rabbi Nassan says, Rabbi Nassim says, I asked Sumchas, Kishamar Rabbi Yeshua, no sing like Ksuva, Sav Enopo. That when Rabbi Yeshua says that he gives her the Ksuva and he does not redeem her, is that Kishidiro Besof Nishbis? Is that when she took the vow and then was captured? Obisha Nishbis Usof Bidura, or was she captured and then he took the vow? Va'amar, he says, Lo Shamat, and he said, I didn't hear this. I didn't hear this. And if we're talking about a scenario where she took the vow, Maui Diro Besof Nishbis, then why would it even matter if she took the vow and then was captured? Maui Nishbis Besof Dira. What would it matter when she took the vow? She took the vow and was then captured, or she was captured and then took the vow. It wouldn't matter one bit because he wouldn't have been doing this shenanigans to get out of having to pay her. So rather, says the Gemara, we go back to our first scenario. What are we talking about? So rather, he took the vow. The husband took the vow. But Abaye and Rava can explain how Rabbi Yeshua is consistent with him, and Rava could explain how Rabbi Eliezer is also consistent with him. Abaye says, what's the reasoning why Rabbi Yeshua says we give her the ksuba and we don't redeem her? What's the reason why Rabbi Yeshua says we give her the ksuba and you don't have to redeem her? According to Abaye, who says you have to redeem her, Amana of a Kohen Gadol. So he says, Abaye Mataran Satame. Amana a Kohen Gadol, if it'll be a widow married to a Kohen Gadol, Kuliyama, everybody would agree. Or Puigi de Chayav of Dosa, everybody would agree that you're obligated to redeem her, even Rabbi Yeshua. Mamzeres v'nisino Yisrael, if it's a mamzeres v'nisina, these people you're not allowed to marry, Kuliyama or Puigi de Eno Chayav Leftos. Everybody would say you don't have to redeem her. Madir Ashes Cohen, and if the wife of a Cohen, if a Cohen makes a vow against and he's married to a woman, Koyama or Puigi, everybody would agree the Chayav of Dosa. Everybody would have to agree that he has to redeem her. The Hainu Almana or Kohen Gadol. So everybody would agree that the wife of a Kohen, of a regular Kohen, everybody would agree that he has to redeem her. The Hainu Almana or Kohen Gadol. This is the exact scenario, the same scenario as a widow to a Kohen Gadol, meaning to say, because she can come back to be his wife. So that's the same scenario. So Kipui, what's the scenario where they're arguing? The Madir H's Israel, where a person makes a vow and he's Israelite, and he says, I vow against my wife that I can't have any benefit from her. That she can't have any benefit from me. Rabbi Eliezer also Basar Meikara, Rabbi Yeshua also Basar Besof. So Rabbi Eliezer follows the original thing, the beginning of the stipulation, meaning to say when they were married. And since at that moment when they were married, he would be able to remain with her after she was married. Therefore, he has to redeem her. Whereas Rabbi Yeshua says we go at the end, Basar Besof. And since he's not required to remain, he's not allowed to remain with her, therefore he doesn't redeem her. And so therefore he doesn't have to redeem her, he just gives her the ksuba. That's how Abaye would explain it. Rabbi Mataratz Otame, Rabbi said, even Rabbi Eliezer can agree with me. Why? He says, Almano Kohen Gadol and Mamzeres Unesino Yisrael Koyama or Pligi. If it's a widow to a Kohen Gadol or Mamzeres Yisrael Koyama or Pligi Dano Chayav Tos. Everybody would say you don't have to redeem her under those circumstances because the marriage is not allowed to be. Ki Pligi. When does Rabbi Eliezer say that you have to redeem her? When does everybody say that you have to redeem her? Ki Pligi b'madir bein Ashes Kohen. So Kipwigi, when does that work? B'madir, bein Ashes Kohen and bein Ashes Yisrael. When does Rabbi Eliezer, and Rabbi Yeshua disagree? In a circumstance, B'madir, after we began the stipulation, meaning when they're married, B'madir bein Ashes Kohen and bein Ashes Yisrael. If he takes a vow against his wife, whether she was married to a Kohen or whether she was married to a Yisrael. Rabbi Eliezer says we go after the beginning of the marriage, meaning when they first got married, since at that moment he could have returned and been with her after he redeemed her. Therefore, he's obligated to redeem her. Whereas Rabbi Yeshua also Basar Besof. Yeshua says after they have upheld the Tanai, and therefore by Yisrael, since now he has to divorce her and he can't remain with her, therefore he's exempt from redeeming her. And the same thing for a Kohen, he should be exempt. Meaning to say, so that also he is not obligated to his wife to redeem her if he can't stay with her as his wife. So that's how the Rabbi would explain the two explanations. Now the Gemara says nishbeis chayav liftosa, that the Mishnah had said that if she was captured, he's obligated to redeem her. So the Gemara says the following scenario: Tan Rabbanan nishbas b'chayav ba'ala. Let's say she was captured while her husband was alive, v'achar kach meis ba'ala, and then her husband died. So she was captured while her husband was alive, and then her husband died. And so therefore, what's the scenario under these circumstances? Hikir ba'ala. Let's say the husband knew that she was captured before he died. Yorshin chayav liftosa. Then the heirs are obligated to redeem her. Well, hikir ba'ala. But if the husband never knew that she was captured, in Yorshin chayav liftosa, the heirs are not obligated to redeem her. That's the Tanakamos. Whereas Levi Savar, when we have it, Uvda Kihamasnisa, Levi wanted to paskin exactly like this brisa, and only where the father knew, he's obligated to. The husband knew, is he obligated to redeem her, even after he dies. And so therefore, he wanted the orphans to have to redeem her. Amarle Rav Hachi Amar Chabibi. This is what Chabibi. Chabibi refers to Rav's uncle, who is Rabbi Chia. He says, so Rav said the law is not like that brisa. El Kihadetanya, the law is like the following brisa, which says, Nishbeis la'achar misas bawa, that if she's captured after her husband has died, she's captured after her husband dies, the orphans are not obligated to redeem her. And not only that, that even if she's captured while her husband, so he says that the law is like the other brisa, which says if she's captured after her husband died, the orphan don't have to redeem her. But not only that, I'll feel nishbeis b'chayiv, even if she's captured while her husband is alive, and then the husband dies, they still don't have to redeem her. Because I can't say because we can't apply the phrase of this ksuba, which says, I'm going to redeem you and come back to me as my wife, since he's dead. So therefore, Reb Chia says, he said to Rav that you don't have to redeem her where the husband has died. Let's say she's captured and they want 10 times her value, exorbitant amount. So, the first time he has to pay it. From that point on, if he wants to redeem her, he can, but he's not required to. Whereas Shimon Gamliel says, and Rahman al-Sunday, we've seen this scenario even today with captured soldiers. You don't pay more than the market value to redeem captives, because that's something terrible for the world. Because what's going to happen, then they're going to just keep raising the prices on the captives, because you're going to see it's a lucrative business. So the Gemara says, "Habichti demand," but if it is the fair market value, then we're going to say, "Podin, we redeem them." Afagav de perkuna yoser al ksufa. So then, if it is the market value, then we're going to have to redeem her, even though the redemption is more than the actual ksuba. There are many, but we have a contradictory source to this. It says nishbeis, if she was captured, and they're requesting from her 10 times her ksuba. Parmishona poda, the first time we have to redeem her. From that point on, ratza poda, ratza ina poda. From that point on, he's not required to. Shimon ben Gamliel says, if her redemption was equal to her ksuba, redeem her. Otherwise, he doesn't have to redeem her. So we see from here that he doesn't have to pay more than the price of the ksuba. So therefore, it's not possible that he has to pay it. So the Gemara says he had two leniencies. He says, first of all, the husband doesn't have to redeem her more than her value, and also he doesn't have to redeem her more than the ksuba. So that's both of those leniencies were Rabbi Shimon Gamliel taught. Well, if she got sick, he has to pay for medicine. A widow is supported from the estate of the heirs. A widow is supported from the estate of the heirs, and she needs medical expenses. A widow is supported from the estate of the heir. A widow is supported from the estate of the heirs, and if she gets sick, and if she needs medical expenses, then it's like her expenses, and so it needs to be paid. Whereas Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, "Refuah sheyesh la kitzva nisrapes miksuva." So if the medical expenses have a fixed amount, you pay from the ksuva. She'en la kitzva, but if it's not fixed, if it doesn't have a fixed amount, harei kimizonos, then it's like support, and so therefore, just like the heirs are not obligated to redeem her, so they also don't have to pay her medical expenses. So if it has no fixed amount. So I'm Rabbi Yochanan Asu Hakazastam Barat Yisrael Karfua Sheila Kitzvah. He said they did bloodletting in the land of Israel is like medical expenses that have no fixed amount. Krivi Rabbi Yochanan Havilo Isas Abba Have Tzrichas Rafua Kol Yoma. The relatives of Rabbi Yochanan had an obligation to support the wife of their father who had medical expenses every day. And there was no fixed amount. And so therefore it was like mizonos that the heirs had to pay. Also coming to Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yochanan said to them, Ezulo kotzle mide rofe. Go and establish a price with a doctor. You go and establish a price, and as a result of this, it'll become a medical expense at a fixed amount, and therefore the orphans don't need to pay. It'll come out of the ksuva. Rabbi Yochanan, asinu atzmeinu korchei adayanim. So Rabbi Yochanan says, we made ourselves like the orchei adayanim, like the lawyers, meaning to say it's not appropriate. Meikar myself or solve myself. Why did Rabbi Yochanan get upset about this? Because it says you're not in Pirkei Avos, you're not supposed to make yourself like a lawyer. Why was he at the beginning? What did he think? At the end, what did he think? So the Gemara said, "Meikar savar mi b'sarchalo tisalam, well b'sov savar adam chashav shani." At first, he said, "From your flesh you shall not hide," and meaning take care of your relatives. And in the end, he said, no, since we're distinguished people, we have to be very careful. We shouldn't act like this. Okay, so now we're up to the next Mishnah. The Mishnah says, "L'kasavla ban and dichrendi habilechem inun yarsin kesef ksuvayach yasrach and temachei and chayav." Let's say this was a stipulation of the ksuva, which we said had to be included, which was that this was what's called the ksuva ban and dichrendi, the male ksuva, that the grandfather wants his grandchildren to get the money, and the father of the mother of these children, and so therefore, for that reason, they stipulated that if the woman brings in a dowry, it goes to her children and not to the husband's other children. So, but let's say she did it right. Okay, and he didn't write this phrase in. Nevertheless, it's still stipulated. Because that's considered a stipulation of the court. Let's say he says, Banan Nukfo and Diab, let's say he says the girls that you'll give birth to, let's say he says, he didn't write these girls that will be born from me, Yahav Yasuf Babesi, should remain in my house, and be supported from my estate until they are married to men. Chayav is still obligated to do it. Shehu Tanai Bezin, because it's a stipulation of the court. So the Gemara. So then they said another takana v'chamim. Ate yasva b'beisi u'mitzana minachsa. He says you should remain in my house and be supported by my estate. Call you may mayor almanosach. They say this to the widow: as long as you are a widow, stay in my house and be supported by the estate. Chayav, it's still obligated. Shoot tonight, Bezdin, because that's a stipulation of the court. And that's what the people of Jerusalem would actually write in their ksuva. But the Anshe Galil, how you kosvin ka Anshe Yerushalayim. But the Galilee people would write like the people of Jerusalem, and they would write it that way. But Anshe Yehuda, how you kosvin. But the men of Judah, the people of Judah would write it Ad Sheyirtzu HaYorshim and Tein Lach Ksuva Sech. And people of Judah would write until the heirs want to give you their ksuba, meaning to say they have the right to buy you out. If they want, they could give her the full ksuba and be done with her. So that's the dispute between the men of Jerusalem and the men of the Galilee. They said she doesn't have to take her ksuba; she could just remain supported until she wants to take her ksuba, where the men of Judah said that the heirs could buy her out rather than having to support her forever. Why did they institute this idea of the male ksuba? Because we wanted a person to be as generous with his daughter as he was with his son, and give her a big dowry. And so therefore, if he was worried that money was all going to go to the other children, he wouldn't do it. Gemara says, is it possible that the Torah says the son should inherit, not the daughters? And here the rabbis come along and institute that the daughter should inherit as well. Gemara says, yeah, because Hanami Diaraisu, it's also biblical that the rabbis want the daughters to inherit, because it says, it says, take women and give birth to children, sons and daughters, and take your children. Take for your sons wives. For your daughters, take men. I understand how he can. You could take wives for your sons, meaning to say, because a man is going to look for a wife. How can he take sons for his husbands? Must be must be that the father has to clothe her and dress her and give her a dowry. So somebody will come and marry her. Vad kama, and how much longer, how much do you have to pay to have somebody marry your son, your daughter? 10% of his estate. The Gemara says, Ve'ema da'av leirus da'ba leirus. So the Gemara says, maybe what's the reason the sages instituted this male ksuba, so that the father can write a dowry for his son? Maybe we should say only the estate of the father, that's what her children should inherit. But the husband of the money of the husband, meaning to say the other money that the husband the other money that he promised her not to Tosefes, the baseline, low lerus. Maybe her children should get it. Gemara says, Imkain, Av Nami mi money will cost. If that would be the case, the father won't give anything. No, we'll stop here. God willing, we'll take this up on